July 14th, 2020. We are here again for another episode, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Kim Lantis in Hermosillo,
Hello.
Mexico. Welcome, Kim. And Carlos Ponce from outside of Mexico City. Welcome, Carlos.
Hi, Talia.
And we have our guest today, James Cohen, who's the co-founder and CEO of Nevvon. Hi, James. Welcome to the show. Let's get right into it. We'd love to get to know who James is. Maybe you could introduce yourself to the audience.
Sure. Firstly, Carlos, Tulio, Kim, thank you for having me on the show today. And welcome everyone who's listening. Of course, my name is James Cohen. I have a very transient life where my home life is actually in Toronto, Canada. And my work life is typically in New York City. So during the work week, I'm usually traveling in New York City or somewhere in the United States where our head office is, but come back home to Toronto to my family. I have been in Toronto since February 19th, since COVID hit. So I've been here, and my background, my education comes in finance. I quickly turned into my field into healthcare, and I'm now doing healthcare technology in my work life.
Great. Thanks for the introduction. And tell us about Nevvon. Tell us about your company. What gave birth to this idea? What do you guys do? Please let the audience know what your company's all about.
Sure. Getting to Nevvon, the company right now, was a journey to get here. Nevvon, what we do is we do compliance training for the healthcare industry. So like many industries, whether you be a lawyer or an accountant, you have to do continuing education credits on a yearly basis in order to maintain your certification or licensure. Same with the healthcare industry. So we work with the specific vertical, which is the home care industry, and we certify home care workers in the industry right now using an app-based learning management system.
Thanks. So let's get right into the topic. Kim, please introduce the topic today, because I think it's very timely and it should be an interesting conversation, and we're looking forward to it, especially since you're a multinational company as well. Kim, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, James. So today's topic is the journey to better care using technology, something that we've discussed lately in Dojo Live. But more specifically, can you scale a healthcare tech company multinationally? So, James, we've already got Canada and the United States that you mentioned. Where is Nevvon located? Is there any other countries to add to the mix?
Yes, we have offices in the United States, in Canada, in Spain, and in Israel. That's where all our workers are located.
Perfect. So, immediate answer to your question, can you scale a healthcare tech company multinational? The answer is yes. So what would you like to share with us about that journey?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've noticed when specifically in the healthcare industry, each country has its own healthcare system, of course, and each caregiver, let's call them caregivers who take care of the elderly at home, because that's my specific focus, have been trained differently. For example, in Canada, the training for home care workers is much more extensive than it is in the United States. To give you an idea, in Canada, you have to do something around 750 hours of training in order to get your initial certification to become a caregiver. Many of the caregivers tend to be immigrants into Canada. Many times they're coming in with English as a second language. Education levels are different, as opposed to the United States, where the requirements to be a caregiver is only 75 hours of education. So you're literally speaking about a tenth of the education.
That's insane.
Yeah, so we have much different levels of caregivers. And remember, when we started in Canada and came to the United States, we were a little surprised on the quality of the education in there. So being that we're a technology company, we are able to pivot fast in terms of understanding our user and allocating resources to make the education at a different level, and of course, make it regulated in that state and the country, because each state and each province have different regulations in terms of what is required.
Okay, so your first step is just understanding regulations, the very basics.
Very basics.
What does this, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, languages is a big thing. You know, people speak different languages, so obviously having the
so in your case, we've got at least 5 going on. I'm assuming you've got Canada, which is primarily English and French, and you have United States, which is primarily English. Now you've got Israel. What do they speak in Israel? Is it
Hebrew?
Hebrew, as I said, and then I was like, this is so weird to me. I'm like, I know the Bible's written in Hebrew, but I'm
Right.
like, we still speak Hebrew, right? English too, I think. But then we've got Spain, variation, connection.
I'm not sure if that got through. You're coming in pixelated on my end, Kim.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah,
so the languages are Spanish. Creole is a big language that we're training in, and Mandarin and Cantonese as well. There are 7 big languages that are around the world, specifically in the United States, that many of the caregivers speak. We believe in better training equals better care. So if they can learn in their native language, anecdotally, they should probably learn better. So that's why we decided to build in multi-languages as well.
Yeah, I can see the challenge here and the question, right, from today's topic. Can you scale a healthcare tech company multinationally? There's because of the very varied degree of regulation requirements, or lack thereof. And it's sad in the case of the U.S. that you can be a caregiver with such little training, yes. But it is what it is, right? So how do you tackle that challenge? What are you guys finding yourself doing to be able to be in a multinational environment? Do you have to localize for each different country? That's got to be a challenge to scale, right? How do you manage through that today?
Yeah, so I think the first thing is to look at regulations, and we saw an emerging trend in the industry where home care agencies who employ these caregivers, if they're in New York, they also want to be in New Jersey, they also want to be in Connecticut, they also want to be in Pennsylvania, and they don't want to use different training platforms, different learning management softwares in each of those locations. They'd rather have one master training platform that everybody that could use. So when we started the business, it was very important for us to look at all the different regulations and build out the training based on the regulations where we feel that they are going to expand to. So that was one way we looked at it. Then we looked at it from an instructional design method. So for anyone who doesn't know what instructional designers are, they are the ones that design the courses in a way that understands how the user can use them best. So for example, some people are audio learners. Some people learn better by reading. Some people are tactile learners. So we're taking a lot of the user data and we're understanding how they're best learning based on the quizzes that they pass or don't pass, how fast they're going through the lessons. And we're using that data to continually better the training and the education so they become better caregivers and better trained.
Are you codifying that currently manually, or are you using AI or learning algorithms to enable to get smarter at doing that? Tell us a little about how you're doing that.
Yeah, so definitely we're using Power BI, some AI, some machine learning, which obviously falls under artificial intelligence. We are a startup, so we've only been around in the market for about a year and a half. I do have extensive experience in the space. So anecdotally, I had pretty good educated guesses of what they are, but obviously taken to a next level using some machine learning, understanding who our users are and how they use the products.
When you say understanding the space, I think you had said earlier you have a background in the financial markets, right?
Yeah,
they've been early adopters of advanced and emerging technologies. They've used AI, machine learning years ahead of everybody else. To improve the quality of service, to improve analytics, to make predictions. It goes on and on, right? So, are you borrowing from some of those experiences and applying this into healthcare, or how's that working?
I was definitely a young man when I was there, much younger, half a lifetime ago when I did it, but obviously learned a lot about numbers, and numbers speak for themselves, and numbers many times tell the story. So I have a numbers background and a finance background, but like many people who get into certain businesses or create businesses, I got into healthcare because of personal reasons. Had a family member that was in an aging process and saw how difficult it was to manage the care for my grandmother at that time. And remember when, unfortunately, we were at the end of life, realized that there is an opportunity, that there's a big opportunity over here to make the aging process for families much easier than it is right now, and hopefully much more cost effective. That was my last startup, when I created a home care agency that was I founded it, that was tech enabled, and that's what we did. And I sold that 3 years ago and got into Nevvon soon after that.
I think that's a really beautiful. I'm sorry, Carlos. I think it's a really beautiful connection to always have what we're doing and what we're creating matter to us. And I think here we have the twofold, right? The experience for your users, those who are being trained, and then the end all, who is the recipient of that training, which I think is the ultimate goal. Going back to being multinational, you mentioned a lot of the caregivers within Canada, particularly, have immigrated to Canada. So beyond language differences, I think there might be also cultural differences. Is there any type of training that's touched on there? I mean, for example, I believe in some cultures, females would prefer care directly from females, or what's appropriate, what's inappropriate. Is any of that ever touched on? And if so, what might that be?
Yeah, Kim, great question. Absolutely. I mean, so we have many lessons and modules around cultural sensitivities. We have it around religion. So, for example, if you're going into a kitchen that is halal-based or kosher-based, or you're going into a home where people keep the Sabbath, there are certain things that you should know not to offend the family and keep with the culture or religious requirements that we have. Also, people that come from other countries don't necessarily understand things around meal preparation, for example. So meal preparation is quite an important thing for the elderly who can't cook for themselves anymore. So that is something that we see and that we teach. Communication skills is something that we teach that are within the country. So definitely that is something that is high priority for us to make the caregiver a better caregiver.
So James, let's talk about a little bit the ecosystem. I'd like to understand who your client is. Is it the individual caregiver, or is it agencies? Can you walk us through your client base, who you're targeting? How does it work?
Yeah, great question. So we are a B2B2C model, meaning that the home care agency who employs the caregivers, they're the payer. They're the ones who are paying for the training, and the user is the actual caregiver. So typically, if the audience is not aware, unfortunately, caregivers are very low income. In the United States, they could be making anywhere from as low as $15,000 a year up to $25,000 a year, even though they're doing tremendous work and very, very hard work, both from a physical standpoint and an emotional standpoint, because unfortunately they're, being connected and caring for the elderly who are typically at the end of life. So it's very emotional for them being in the business. And we have them as users. They typically cannot pay for the training. So it's the actual home care agency who pays on it for their behalf.
Yeah. So what kind of impact has COVID had now in terms of a new level of education or even precautions that caregivers have to take now, especially the fact that they're taking care of the elder? My mom has a caregiver. She's turning 80 this August. Right. And it's been it's been quite a challenge from brother's side to manage through that in the past 3 months to make sure that this person who we love is not only protecting herself, but protecting my elderly mother. So how is that impact? How does your company come into play for those kinds of scenarios where it's evolving? It's not a fixed situation. It's constantly evolving. Every week there's different news, right? It's, how are you guys managing through that? And what is the value of this technology in a world where there's constant change and going on?
Yeah, great question, Tulio. So firstly, the home care industry, it was quite difficult because you had, like yourself, maybe you as a family didn't feel comfortable with a caregiver coming into your mom's home because that caregiver might be going into another senior's home, and you don't want them to travel with the virus coming from home to home. And obviously your mom being 80 years old is, the most vulnerable out there. So we had a lot of families who actually rejected care. And then we also had a lot of caregivers who said, we're scared to go into people's homes, and they didn't want to go. It created a huge shortage of caregivers that were going into people's homes. It was a big problem for a few months. Where we'd like to think that Nevvon helped is we had our finger on the pulse as the guidance had changed on how to wear PPE, how to don and doff your masks, your gowns, your gloves, on how to properly wash your hands and keep yourself safe. We had different trainings on how to keep yourself safe in the workplace, how to keep yourself safe while you're traveling from work to home, and of course, how to keep yourself safe at home. We're talking about the caregivers here. And as new guidance came up, because all the training was on the caregivers app, it was on their phone, and they had it accessible to them at all times. As it was happening, we were updating it all the time. So they had the most fresh, newest information at their fingertips, which was really useful. And the families felt much more comfortable because of that.
Yeah, that's great.
I love a company like yours that I think takes care of its people just as much as it takes care of its customer or its client, right? You went back to this idea earlier. You mentioned just the physical and emotional and mental work labor it is to be a home caregiver. Is your app, or what you do for this training also include any type of psychological services?
Yeah, definitely. So,
or how your caregivers can, maintain their own mental health?
Yeah. So Kim, yeah, exactly. So mental health for caregivers is a big topic ever since the pandemic came about. So we've built some incredible education around mental health. I don't know if you read my newsletter today, but we sent out a weekly newsletter and it was about mental health for caregivers. So I don't know if that was just by chance or not, but that's what the topic was. So yes, we talk about mental health for caregivers. We talk about the importance of their job and what they do and how they fit into the healthcare system. Unfortunately, as you guys might know, many of our clients or elderly have dementia or Alzheimer's, which is a terrible disease. You know, the stats are out there. 10,000 people a day in the United States turn 65. By the age of 85, 1 in 2 of us are going to have dementia, which means it's either yourself or your wife who are going to have dementia, right? So it's something that you have to deal with. And with dementia, for the viewers, there are a lot of behavioral issues with dementia, and it's obviously not the person causing these behavioral issues. It's the disease that's doing it. And explaining to the caregivers that the repetitiveness and sometimes the verbal abuse, even the physical abuse, isn't coming from the elderly person, it's the disease talking. We've seen major impact by them just understanding where this behavior is coming from. So there's a lot of support for the caregiver, you know, especially that economically they're not really getting compensated fairly for their for the hard job that they do. So to support them in that way is crucial for the caregiver.
Yeah, it's really sad that the level of compensation they receive. So for families that have those caregivers taking care of your elderly parents, take care of those caregivers. Make sure that they get compensated. If you have to personally add a little bit to it to make their lives easier. It'll go a long way. So I have a question in terms of the accessibility of some of these training modules and some of this content. It seems extraordinarily valuable, not just for the caregiver, but also for the family members. I know it's challenging sometimes for certain family members to accept that their mom or their dad has dementia and they're acting as if they're like a toddler, right? And it's hard to reconcile the fact that this isn't my mom or dad, this is a disease, right? So are some of those modules available for family members, for the general public who wants to become more educated and aware on how to better care for their elderly parents? Is this something you guys are also offering or thinking about offering to expand beyond the agencies?
Yeah, so definitely top of mind. We're in the middle of building it out. We realize that the family caregivers can sometimes maybe use it more than the actual professional caregivers, because as you said, it's a crisis for the families when they see something like this happen to their parents or grandparent or any family member. So definitely something that we're offering for free when it comes out. We're in the middle of building it out, and I believe over the next 2-3 months, it will be out there that any family member can access for free.
We're coming up on time shortly, but I wanted to ask one more question related to the technology itself. Are there plans to be able to offer certain caregiving services remotely? Is there a direction eventually where perhaps through cameras and video monitors, you can provide someone some kind of support, or is that just not a feasible situation? Are there certain people that would fit into that model, i.e. the caregiver is sick that day, but there's a connection between the caregiver and the elderly person that's like a bond that they create? Is there a plan to eventually create a virtual approach to this so that those days when they come, the people don't feel so lost?
Yeah, totally. I've seen some hype and some startup companies try to do that yet. I haven't seen anyone do it really, really well yet. For us, we're not there. It's not in a part of our roadmap as part of Nevvon, but I've definitely seen some startups in the ecosystem look at this and try this, and I'm positive someone will be successful because I think it's a fantastic idea.
Any plans to also offer the caregiver and the person being cared some access to perhaps exercise classes or things of that nature? What's the goal here? Is it I get it's to educate the caregivers, to give access to the family members, to information, to knowledge, to training, to education. Is it also to create a community, perhaps, where people can share ideas? What do you guys think? I know you're a startup, so that's a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that we want in the community to come together and help each other. Again, for the viewers who don't know the stats out there, right now, let's talk about the United States. There are 3.1 million caregivers in the United States right now. They're saying by 2025, in the next 5 years, we're going to need 1.1 million new net caregivers into the system in order to take in the aging population. As we know, people are living longer. People are living with more comorbidities. People prefer to age at home than going into a facility. And especially after the pandemic, where many of the death happened in the healthcare facilities, there's a worry about sending your parent to the healthcare facility. So a lot of people are preferring to, even more so now, stay at home. So we're looking to support the caregiver industry and educate them properly in order to allow the seniors or most vulnerable people out there to age as gracefully as they can. And that's the mission of the company.
Well, it's interesting. We heard a lot about frontline workers in the recent months, but it sounds to me some of these caregivers have been frontline workers for many, many years, taking care of the most needy and the most vulnerable. Is there any push from any company or organization to try to increase the compensation for these caregivers? And the teachers have a union that have pushed hard for them to get better support. That's another thankless job where they don't get paid enough. So have you seen anything along those lines? Any progress, any hope for attracting 1.5 million new workers into that field and making it worth their time? Beyond it's nice to take care of the elderly, but it's also you have to take care of your family, right? So
of course,
what's happening there? Is there any hope for
improvement? So there's been during the pandemic, many of the governments put on hazard pay, where they were paying an extra $4 an hour to the caregiver, and the government was paying for that. Unfortunately, that came to an end, so it only stayed for about 3 or 4 months. But the caregiver world and their job and what they're doing absolutely was magnified on how important it was for years, maybe decades. There's been a lot of lobbying towards the government to give better pay to these caregivers, because at the end of the day, home care is much less expensive than it is to keep someone in a facility for the government. So there's been a push. Well, at home, it costs $300-400 a day to have a full-time caregiver. In a facility, it's much, much more expensive than that. So there's been a big push towards that. Unfortunately, as it's politics, and will probably take years, and depending on the governments that come in, but there's definitely a rising unified voice in order to try to take care of the caregivers. I'm personally involved in that. It's extremely important for me as well.
Well, that's good to hear, and they definitely deserve that. So great to hear that there's support for that. We're coming up on time, James. This is not your first rodeo building a company. Obviously, you had an exit 3 years ago.
Yeah.
What have you learned through this journey, in the healthcare space about yourself and about pushing through, especially during the past 3 months? Any lessons you'd like to share with other possible entrepreneurs who are thinking about going in this direction, who might be struggling with something that they hear you've overcome? We'd love to hear any words of wisdom in terms of your journey, what that's been like.
Yeah, I think what we've done really well, and what I like to say I've done really well at, is fully understanding the user. Who is using the technology that we're producing? How are they using it? And using data to better improve their experience. I know we're running out of time. I'll give you a quick, cool example that a lot of people that I speak to, I let them know about it, and it speaks to how much effort and investment that we put into the technology that we built. So we did many focus groups across the United States where we brought these caregivers in and we asked them questions and we viewed how they use the technology. And I'll give you an example. We asked them, what are the 2 most popular apps on your phone? And our learning management system is firstly an app. We of course have a web platform, but we built it on an app. And they told us that the 2 most popular apps were by far and wide WhatsApp. And that made sense. You know, if there are immigrants into the country, they can video chat for free back home. They can communicate, makes a lot of sense. And Instagram. Those were the 2 main apps. What we did is we built our whole user experience, our UI and our UX, based on those 2 apps. How you register, how you navigate from page to page. So when they go into our app, it will feel very familiar to them, and they hopefully will have a better user experience because they're used to it. That's extremely important to us. And I think fully understanding our user is what has made me successful, or the company successful, the previous one and this one. And we put a ton of effort, of investment and money to making sure that our users enjoy using it, because they're our clients at the end of the day. So if anything, I would say really understand your user and keep gathering that data and keep innovating to make sure they enjoy using your product.
Thanks, James. Sounds like focusing on people never goes out of style, right?
Yeah.
I heard you use the word immigrant several times. Immigrants, we get the job done. That's from the
absolutely
from the play Hamilton. If you haven't watched that play,
yes.
you should watch it.
I've been
Immigrants, we get the job
well,
done.
and
All of us are immigrants.
All of us are immigrants. So yeah, absolutely.
So we get the job done. That's a great line from that show.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us as we wrap up. Carlos, we got 2 more shows this week, one tomorrow and Thursday. Just a quick reminder who's coming up to the audience.
Sure. Tomorrow, Tulio, on Dojo Live, we have Reed Blackman, the CEO and founder of Virtue. And we're going to be speaking about operationalizing data and AI ethics. And also on Thursday, we'll be with Sammy James from Speak to Leads. And we're going to be speaking about the squiggly path to success. So these are different companies and different verticals and spaces, but they're all relevant to the tech world. And I will look forward to seeing you here on Dojo Live at 1 p.m. Pacific, tomorrow and Thursday.
Stay safe, everyone.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.